I think that would be so fun.
Yes.
So, John, I made that very same argument when we were talking, was it last year, about the former PD site.
Right.
And I would tend to agree with, if you know what you want, then that can kind of guide what studies and what you need to do. Unfortunately, I think the overwhelming feedback from council was, well, how do I know what I can do if we can't build down, if we can't go out? So I hear what you're saying, and I echoed a lot of those same thoughts of, if nobody wants to do X, then why are we worrying about that? Let's just move forward. But, not to speak for my other 9 colleagues, the majority of people are like, well, I don't know what is feasible in this space, and I'd rather not make a decision without knowing, and going down that path. So, but I hear what you're saying of, if you know that the majority of council wants to head in a direction, that can help guide some of the studies. But it's a very similar conversation that took place about a year ago.
Well, it's an important conversation to have, and I'm not saying that my answer necessarily is the right way to go, but it just seems to me that these kinds of things will drag on forever and ever, long past when you're on council, and not that you're not going to run for another 7 or 8 terms, but you're so young anyway. And the public needs to know. I mean, there's a lot of other things that hang out there. Park district planning, if there's an impoundment of any sort, sure, in theory, then the riverboats and other things aren't really in question anymore. And so how do they plan out for 5 years, 10 years, et cetera? If the city has said, we don't want an impoundment, we want to be in a quote unquote, natural state, or whatever, however you want to define the dam removal, and no other actions taken.
Right. Sorry, I'm directing this to Heather. It was a couple of government services meetings ago, or a couple weeks ago. We talked about the timeline with the new dates and everything. We're looking at, 2026 is when, we're asked to on something. If our studies are completed, realistically, post 26, when would people be able to expect, if we're going to go, path A, we could have, dams removed or things being worked on, by 27 you would have it, potentially opened up? Or how many years are we looking at realistically before, post the decision being made, something actually changing with the spot?
My caveat on this is you're realistically versus what the Army Corps has told us, I think, are probably 2 different things, only because we've already been through this with them since 2014. I think they started saying they were going to go down this path, and we've already been pushed out another year. So based on what they've recently told me, this 2025 year would be feasibility. They would look for commitment from the city in early 26 about removal. If we, as a city, as a group, decided, yes, we want the dam removed, their intent based on their current phasing would be to do that in 27 and 28, complete removal of the dam.
Okay.
I guess I'm not the scientific one here, but my only concern about your proposition is, it would seem to me that the idea or the concern, or let's rephrase it, the decision.
Oh, you got to turn it.
What is the problem with it? It's on. I'm just not on. Okay, my concern is this: that in order to establish which route the city council may want to go, for them to decide if they go impoundment or no impoundment, I think some of the information that we would derive from the investigation under this, proposal has to be derived first. They have to know what it is. I don't think they have enough information yet to make that decision.
I don't think you'll ever have enough information to make a 100% solid decision.
Well, no, I understand that, but the point is, by cutting off half of it, as you say, we decide to go one road or the other, I don't know if they really have enough, you're cutting off half the information, you're not going to have half of the input from some of the professionals here, so I don't know if that's really the appropriate way to go. I mean, if I were a city councilman, and I'm not, I would feel like I wasn't getting the full spectrum of the information I need to have to make an informed decision. I'm talking about early on. I mean, I agree with you in concept. I think all of us would be frustrated with the time frame. I'd like to get this done as soon as possible, myself. It's not up to me, but I would like to get it done as soon as possible. But unfortunately, the government's involved. You know, when you have a governmental entity involved, speed is not really something that is what they're known for, number one. And number two, as you were saying, it's not always the best way to go. If we don't get the information, we don't, deal with it properly. So, I don't know. I mean, I think we use your comments. What's that? Yeah, I'll get to it in a second. I think we remain mindful of your comments, and perhaps we throw that question to the city council at some point in January, February. We say, hey, are you guys, is the city council in a position where they can make the decision that they want to, proceed on the premise that there's going to be an impoundment or there won't be an impoundment?
Well, I would say, because I brought this up a couple of months ago at city council, and, just speaking for myself, I think it's reasonable that the city doesn't take a position on this. Currently, although I can see where you're coming from, but I think it's fair to say, because I've been concerned a lot about, making sure that the citizens have as much peace of mind as possible, but we're living in uncertainty. When you take a look at, the Army Corps has changed what they said, what their timelines are for, what they're requesting from us. I mean, to realistically say that we can have any control over the timeline, it's not reasonable. But I think it's also reasonable to say that city council has taken action that said that nobody's in a hurry to get rid of the dam, that city council has, at the very beginning of this, assessed that, it doesn't look like there's any, that the dam is structurally sound. But I'm as uncomfortable as you are in understanding that we really just can't make this go faster, and it's something that we have to live with, because the questions are like, well, if we'd like to keep the dam, well, how much does that cost? I mean, we don't have that information yet. If it was to come out, what would that look like? I mean, it's good to understand that, but I mean, we unfortunately really can't talk about it. We can't make an informed decision, but I think it's fair to say to everybody that city council hasn't been in any kind of a hurry to remove any dam. There's not pressure to remove it, that's for sure. So, I mean, it's a reasonable question, but, I mean, that being the case, and understanding that this is all going to be tenuous going forward, I think that we just kind of have to understand that. I wouldn't mind, as much policy guidance as possible from the city, but I think it's reasonable to wait for information because, I mean, we hardly have a consolidation and stable information between us on this dam committee and this dam task force. So, I mean, we can talk about that we'd like, better information to move faster, but realistically, I think it's also unfair to say that anything that the city of St. Charles is doing is delaying this process.
I'm going to pile on to what he said. I'm going to wear my federal hat here for a second. So the Army Corps of Engineers tried to publish a draft environmental assessment of their habitat study. Heather just told us that they're redoing that now as a programmatic. That is a legally and policy lens different document. That is going to take them a year if it's an environmental assessment. Statutory requirements on that is a year. It's going to take them a year to do that, so sometime in 2025, as you said. The color of money that they're going to get to start the next phase is only going to last one congressional funding cycle through 2026. To do the engineering and the implementation regulatory documents, environmental assessment, environmental impact statement, their 404 permits, et cetera, is going to take the Army Corps of Engineers between 2 and 3 years. They're going to have to go to Congress every single year for those additional colors of money. That's not going to be guaranteed. So they're not going to have their full technical details and understanding to make a decision, and they cannot legally make a decision at this point until they have all of those details and publish their EIS. That means that we don't need to rush anything. They are going to be those number of years out, 3 to 4, statutorily. They cannot rush it anymore. So we don't need to rush our process.
Well, I guess what I was implying is that the city take charge of the timeline as opposed to waiting for the Corps. That if the city says, take out the dam tomorrow, then the Corps
It wouldn't matter. Even if the city, if Heather called up the Army Corps of Engineers and said, we don't want the dam anymore, take it out, the Corps has to publish their existing EA.
Right.
I haven't seen it hit the Federal Register yet, so we're probably at least 6 months out from that programmatic, which they haven't taken public comments on. That's a 30-day window plus a 30-day cooling off period. Then the Corps would have to start design feasibility, which would be 3 to 6 to a year, 3 months to 6 months to a year. Then they would have to go through another NEPA approval process because the spending of federal money and the carrying out of a construction project is classified as a major federal action. That's an EA or EIS if it's going to have a significant impact on the human environment. If there's any sort of an impact on the human environment taking a dam out, which we know there are, it's an EIS that's 2+ years. So you can't just call the Army Corps of Engineers and say, take a dam out, and next week it's out.
It just seems like it's gonna be a long, long time before anybody knows anything, and a whole lot of money.
Yeah, but that's also a long time that we have a dam and we have a pool of water and that we get to rely on, you know, life without change, which I can't see as bad.
Now that you've raised the frustration level of everyone in this room, where do we go from here?
I got 2 questions for Heather.
Please, ask.
Heather, 2 quick questions about the SOI. Since there are kind of 3 large legs to this thing, engineering, economics, and environmental, are you going to allow teaming on?
I believe that's the intent, that we will have any of those responses that allow for that, yes.
Okay. And then what's the reach? Are you guys going regional, national? Are you hitting up like HDR, Ramble, and such? Or are you looking for a local consultant?
I think we are going to go national, and we'll accept all those in, and that will be part of our evaluation process with whatever we get in. So we will post it everywhere that we can, and then depending on what we get in, once we create that evaluation criteria with that subgroup, that may be relevant to that piece of it.
Cool, thanks.
Any other comments on this topic? Yes?
If there is additional feedback, I know that some of the particulars that I got back were technical in nature, and those are more easily delivered through email. I'm happy to receive those as well, but I have received and incorporated all the comments to this point.
All right. The next agenda item is subcommittee reports. We didn't really have any assignments for subcommittee reports. So I don't know if there are any subcommittee reports unless any subcommittee wants to put forth something that I'm not aware of. Look at this nice picture. Yes.
Yeah, so in the appendix, I just added flow data. So one thing I talked about at earlier meetings is that USGS, so United States Geological Survey, they maintain a flow gauge at various stages throughout the river. The closest one to us is the South Elgin gauge. And so I was able to go and pull 16 years of data, and I just put it in there just as a reference for people when they want to talk about flow, because the river comes up, the river comes down. It's just natural flow throughout the year. This time of year, a lot of times it's down around, and this, like September, October was about 300 cubic feet per second. When it gets up in the springtime, high flows in the springtime are like 3,000, but like flood stage happens at like 4,000 or 6,000. So based on what it is now, it can literally be 20 to 30 times more water flowing through the river. So it's just remember that it's a very dynamic system. It comes up, it comes down, and sometimes it's low. This year, our lows were about 300 cubic feet per second. I've heard just within the public people talking about historic flow levels, and that's not really true because we look at that 300 cubic feet per second level. It's been there for the last 5 years. If you go out to the full 16 years, depending on how you count it, you know, whether you count 1 day or 1 week, you know, it's been there 9 or so of the last 16 years. So the flows that we experienced this year were kind of normal flows that we'd expect to see. Thanks.
Any questions? Great. All right. Hold on a second. I'll find my agenda. All right. So after all that scintillating discussion, public comments? Please, can you please come up right here to the microphone, and also, would you please provide your name and address?
Hello, my name is Wayne Valley. I live in 2 miles north on the river, on the, between 31 and the river, in the Farmington subdivision. I used to work for Great Lakes Dredge and Dock. I stood up here on your first meeting and introduced myself. I'm a contractor, I'm also a civil engineer, and I've done rock work for 30 years doing similar stuff like what you got right here. You need a contractor on your task force to talk to you about what has to be done and how it has to be, how the approach that you have to take to get it done. You got all kinds of studies to do here to determine a cost of replacing the dam. You also got information that you have to develop so that you can take the dam out if you decide to do that. You need hydrographic surveys. You need to test how much silt you got behind the dam. You got to do a survey on the dam itself with divers, not somebody standing on the shoreline. You got to get divers in the water to see how bad this dam is, if its present condition. And all that's going to help you determine a cost of either taking the dam out or rebuilding the dam and access to the dam. One of the biggest problems for this site here is getting access with equipment to that dam, because you got development on both sides. It's not like the other dams in the other cities, because I've been up and down the river looking at every dam, the 9 dams, and this dam here and its location is the worst for getting equipment and personnel and materials to the site. So you need to get somebody that knows something about construction, demolition, which I have, so you can do the studies that need to be done to create a cost, so you have an idea what it's going to cost the city if they want to accept the dam and rebuild it, or if the IDNR is gonna take it out, then you still have to have information for them. Maybe they would gather it, but you need to hire a good design engineer. And when I was here the first time, I brought somebody that I've worked with that is nationally known, and Baird and Associates out of Madison, Wisconsin, the top marine engineer probably in the country. And I used them on a big job in Ghana that I was on, and hired them, and I told them how I wanted to build the job, and they designed it around the way I wanted to build it. And I was there for 8 years of my career. It was the biggest job that Ghana ever released to a contractor. But anyway, I'm trying to help you guys. I offered my services free of charge, and I haven't had anybody call me or anything like that. But you need to sit down and talk about what has to be done so that you can gather the information to provide to help the engineer, help the city make a decision, have the city council make a decision, but you have to provide information. I'm just trying to help you. So that's what I got to say. Rock work was my work for 25, 30 years. So I know how to do rock work. So, and concrete work. And I don't know if any of you have been down to Yorkville, but that was a concrete stair-step design that they did. Very nice. It turned out wonderful. But it's going to take 2 to 3 years to do something like that because of the winters here in this country, in this part of the world. So you do a certain amount each summer, and your best months are late in the year, August, September, October. That's when the water is the lowest, and that's when you're going to get most of the work done. You got to drive a sheet pile coffer dam to close off half that river, like they did when they rebuilt the bridge. And you got to do that, but you have to have access. You got to have barges come in, and you got to drive pile, and you got to have a staging area so you can get the material to the job. I'm just talking here, but I know what I'm talking about. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. You know, before you leave tonight, could you provide people over at that desk your name and contact information? Yes, please. Anyone else? Nope. He stood up first. You're next.
Evening, everybody. My name is Nolan Day. I live on Rockwell, just south of the Red Gate Bridge on the river. And I just have to say that I hope that in the studies that they would also talk to the businesses about economic impact and think about the homeowners near the river that bought their places because of the recreational activities as we know it today. So I hope that's part of any study.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Street. I'm from St. Charles, and I know you're all volunteers, and we appreciate what you're doing. But I would like to say that Conrad Newell, I totally agree with you. If you have a subject matter expert on this team, why would you not take their advice? They've been there, they've done that, and to try to not do that, in my opinion, is disastrous. So thank you for your input.
I think you were next, yes.
My name's Kelly. We live directly, my husband and I live directly across from Potawatomi and the golf course on the river. So this is, of course, a huge concern for us for a number of reasons. And I very much appreciate Mr. Bradshaw mentioning about how important it is that we have these decisions about what's happening sooner than later for a number of reasons. Yeah, if I was selling, I need to know. I even think I might have some disclosure concerns and what have you, if I were. But also, like, if I want to remodel my kitchen, I guess it's going to have such a large effect on the value of our house. I would want to know if that's happening first before I'm making decisions about, do I want to go with top of the line or do I want to go, where do I want to be? So that timing is a concern, but coming into this, I was under the impression that it was not just A or B. I thought it was A, B, or C, and so perhaps I made the wrong assumption about that. Does the city of St. Charles already have a preconceived notion about whether they prefer to have empowerment or not? I never thought to ask that. Do we know?
I don't believe they do at this point.
Okay.
Our job is to collect information, to provide it to them so they can make a decision.
Yeah, and so that's where I had started. The thought was, we need a lot of information before we can even say whether we want one or not. Not for sure we don't want one at all, or we do and it's automatically going to go to some other alternate than what we currently have. Because maybe C, perhaps is it still that we might have an existing dam the way it is and live with what we have until it can't exist anymore because it's falling apart, and then maybe we are only wanting to repair it as it is. So I'm thinking that was possibly C, right? So A is get rid of it completely, B is something in between, and then C is we have it, let's keep it, let's move on. So is it A, B, and C, or is it, okay, so it is still A, B, and C, okay. So as far as we know, the council does not have already an idea of what they want at all? Okay, so, okay. Good to know. Conrad, thank you so much for explaining what's involved. I had no idea the scope and the timing of the scope for things when they happen. That's a much more process and time frame limited by some of the regulations set up around using federal money, I suppose, is what you're saying. So it never occurred to me that that's why these things take so long, and that makes more sense as to why it happens. So I'm less mad then, but sometimes things taking a long time. Last point about being less people here, I don't think we're less interested. Election just happened. It was a pretty big deal. So I think people are still recovering after that one way or another, whether they were celebrating or they're crying, one or the other. And then lastly, because it's been so long since the last meeting, it's hard to keep track of whether you're doing them or not because we have busy schedules. I actually dragged my husband over here one of the times you had canceled because I didn't realize it was canceled because it looked like it was happening. I never rechecked and didn't realize I should check on the day just to make sure it doesn't just cancel. So I think communication about whether meetings are still happening a little bit in advance that we are, or literally like if we can decide shortly after, if you guys know we're going to skip 3 months or 2 months, let us know that so we can stop having to check all the time. I completely forgot about today. I was out on a run and I was running and I'm like, oh my God, it's the 7th. I think we're supposed to meet. And I thought, they're probably canceling because of the election is a lot in 1 month. and holiday this month, and sure enough, you guys were having it, so I ran home, I said, Rich, let's get ready, let's go. So I think the public's really interested. Still don't take the lack of people here as we're losing interest, because we're not. It's super, super important to our community. I used to live close to the city of Chicago. The first time I moved out here, I was actually a renter on the river at Park Shore, what used to be called Park Shore Apartments. When I arrived here, I said, I am never leaving this town. I love it here. And it was all about the river. So for most of us, a lot of us, we live here because of the river, and it's super important. So thank you all for putting your time into it. I really appreciate it. A little more information about when we're having meetings and that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay. I got the man standing right there.
Hi, John Newton. I've been water skiing on this river since 1990. I've lived here since '02 on the river in St. Charles. I have yet to meet anyone who lives on the river that wants it to change. We've heard people with concerns with environmental concerns with mussels. They take out the river or the dam up in Carpentersville, and there's thousands of mussels there. So we've also heard safety. But then we also hear that there is, if the dam removal doesn't happen, that there's federal money for a stair-step design to improve safety. We hear a lot of stuff. But those of us that live here on the river, I've yet to hear one single person want the dam removed. We bought here, we stay here, we're drawn here for the river. Not 100%, but a large portion, as well as our housing values. You know, one of the meetings, I heard one of the environmentalists say, oh, housing values will improve. No, they won't. I paid extra for my house to be on the river. I would imagine everyone who lives on the river has done that as well. That's a huge chunk of my wealth. So keep it concise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Tom Starowski. I live in the Timber Subdivision. You guys have probably recognized the name from the emails I keep sending you. So I'm a big advocate of the Active River project, and like everybody else, I don't think anybody wants the ponding to go away. I really think moving the dam upstream, keeping the ponding so we have all the recreation, the boating, everything else stay there. My question to you to relay to the board members of the council is, if this takes another 4 or 5 years, what happens with the police station property, which could be part of this whole development? And so does that put that on hold for 4 or 5 years? Or because right now, they talked about putting high rises there, which I think is terrible. If it could be part of this whole development, whether it's Active River for kayaking or canoeing, cardboard boat regattas, whatever, should we ask the city to put that on pause until we decide what we're doing with the river? That is my concern right now. So,
thank you.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Greg Rusnak, and I live on the river, a little north of Redgate. I started coming to these meetings, and it seems like some of the major concerns for the city of St. Charles is if they leave up the dam and the dam is put in their name, they're kind of responsible for the upkeep. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So, first of all, there is no evidence that there is anything wrong with it. And like this gentleman over here mentioned, it'd be nice to have a study done on that. But it's the equivalent of, having a 7-year-old car and deciding to have it crushed because it just might start breaking down. If the whole idea is to save money by giving up the dam and tearing it down, why not just let it run its course? I mean, it might be fine for another 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 years, and then eventually it'll slowly start to deteriorate, and eventually it'll end up being the way you guys are talking, how they might want it in 3 or 5 years from now. So, just food for thought.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, Randy Kula from St. Charles, 50-year resident here. Mr. Lencioni, I appreciate your comments. I think you should do a full review, okay? No shortcuts, sorry. Also, I think you should have very unopinionated people on the task force, not somebody with an agenda as well, okay? My understanding is the dam has been reviewed when it had a low water level a few years ago, and there was no issues with the dam. So the other thing is I remember being here that the water wall along the city building here was repaired about 15 or so years ago. So I don't think we have an issue with the dam, okay? We have an asset, okay? It complements our environment, our way of life, as well as Potawatomi Park. I personally would hate to see that dam get removed. I've already seen the very in-depth studies that they've done, and they've turned out false. So I really appreciate Mr. Lencioni saying to go through the studies, because I think that's needed. If we are going to keep an asset here, we can budget for an asset. We have a roof on our house. We know it's going to get damaged over a period of time. We put a budget in there. We get ready, to replace that, so we're not financially impacted. I think St. Charles can take a similar approach. We have an asset. We know that there is going to be damage over a period of time. We can financially plan for that kind of asset that we have and keep it. So I appreciate if we would continue the studies and get thorough studies and not short-sight the situation we have here.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much. Seeing that, I guess our next agenda item is to set our next meeting. So you know what it is. And when would our next meeting be, Heather, do you suppose?
I think we're going to be looking at least a couple-month gap while we issue this SOI and then form a working group to evaluate those responses that we get. So it'll be into the new year.
So should we say February is our next meeting?
That is likely the timeline.
What date in February do you suppose?
First Thursday.
First Thursday in February is the 6th.
So unless you hear otherwise, and check the web, the site, February 6th, okay?
So Heather, you're saying February 6th, we would have a consultant selected?
That would be my expectation, that we would form a subgroup between the task force, the city council, and the park district to select a consultant and get that finalized, and then the meeting would be actual work of the task force by then.
Okay, so you've got responses to the SOI, depending on what kind of comments you get back from all of us, would still be the end of November, beginning of December, and then you're going to do an RFP for a month and then do 2-3 weeks of evaluation?
That would be the intent, yes.
Okay.
Is that enough time?
I believe so. Once we get a consultant selected, and then we can make a presentation to both groups with what we want to recommend the start of that scope be, and then bring it to a committee meeting from our perspective, and then the same with the park district, and then get that finalized.
If you hit up the firms that typically do this type of work, they can get responses to you in 2 weeks, and usually you can do a response or a review in.
Yeah, they're not my concern. My concern is other stuff, but I think you think February 6th is going to be sufficient, okay?
And then I've got a question for you, Heather.
Yes.
You're talking about a subgroup from this task force as well as having some state. When are we going to decide on the members of that subgroup?
We will probably have to make some recommendations offline and determine that. If there's anybody that is interested in participating in that, I will accept those. However, given that we will have a city council component, a park district, those are already represented on this group. Obviously, the 2 public members are the ones that are not already represented elsewhere, so that would be my recommendation if they are interested in doing that, which would be Brian and Conrad.
Right. We know who they are. So, okay.
Taking Christmas off.
So are we good?
I have all the information I need.
Everybody here okay? Any other comments? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming.